Hey y'all, it's Dark Sugar Podcast coming to you fresh out the packet with everything black.
Hey y'all, welcome to Dark Sugar Podcast. This is your girl, Kiana. It's a beautiful Sunday. I'm relaxed. It's a little melancholy though, I'm not gonna lie. I hope everyone's being safe. There's been, so many people I know with the coronavirus or know someone who has passed from it recently, and it's been pretty scary. So I just want to keep that in mind. This month coming into the new year, this Sunday, just being more thoughtful and reflective, thinking about things going on. But today's episode is on PTSD, which I'm really grateful to talk about because I think it needs to definitely have more light shown on it, and it needs to be normalized and put in different context, because I know a lot of the times we hear PTSD, we think war veteran, we think something very violent or crazy traumatic, which totally those are valid too, experiences for people to have an aftermath of PTSD. But I also know people like myself who have had childhoods who so some people I've had a lot of people tell me my childhood wasn't that bad, and I've had a lot of people dismiss me and my trauma and say, oh, you're just really weak. Back in my day we had it like this, we had it like that. Yours sounds like yours sounds like you were just a little weak. You're just a little weak in, you and your generation type thing. But the more I grow up and stand in my own, I'm kind of like, no, I think as a collective community, in the behavioral community, mental health community, in the Black community, we are acknowledging how much, we're acknowledging how much your childhood affects you in your adulthood. And I think being diagnosed with PTSD, I think I was 23 years old when I was diagnosed. And it was definitely, actually, I'm lying. I was younger than that. I must have been 21. Yeah, I think I was 21 years old. I was in college. And at this point, I had started taking medicine. I think the first medication I did try was an antidepressant. I think I tried, was it Prozac? It may have been Prozac. It kind of made me start to hallucinate and more depressed. But I had met with a psychiatrist at my college, who I trusted, and we, had concluded that the panic attacks that I was having at school and the anxiety that I was experiencing was really debilitating, and I needed therapy and medication at that point, because it was getting to the point where I couldn't even pinpoint exactly what was wrong. It was just to the point where it was like my life, like, I don't know, it's just everything. Like, it just felt like I couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. I just had this cloud of dread following me, it seemed like. Was put on medication, and the more I opened up to him about my childhood, he's like, it sounds like, he's like, we're gonna, I'm gonna ask you some questions, we're gonna do this thing, we're gonna figure some things out, but it's really sounding like you have PTSD from your childhood. And at first I was really in denial. I can go to the extent and say that I was offended, but I was definitely in denial and didn't want to accept that. I had been in one car accident at that point. And I'm not the most, I'm okay. I'm more comfortable driving now. And now I've been in 2 car accidents, but at that point I'd only been in one. And it was a pretty, traumatic car accident, as in, like, there was trauma done to my body. I had 6 months of physical therapy. It was a really heavy, big deal for me, but it's not like I feared driving. It's not like I didn't think that was enough to have PTSD. He's like, no, it is from your childhood. He's like, I'm not saying it's from a car accident. And I was like, what the chill. And, I told my mom, and I can't quite remember her exact words, but I know she was pretty, like, taken back, sad, super shocked. And my doctor just said, yeah, your brain is the equivalent of someone who's been to war. That's how hypervigilant you are. And at that point, it was to the point where in the student, the student union center at our college, when I was in there eating, I would hear my name being called throughout the like hum of all the noise, and I would frequently hear my name being called. And he was like, yeah, that's like not normal. And I was like, oh fuck, I was so hyper vigilant from my mom yelling at me, and I was having frequent panic attacks in college. I'd have to skip class, sometimes I'd have to miss work. It was really my anxiety. I do suffer with anxiety now still. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder when I was around 12. But I think college, because I was on my own, it was a new environment away from home, my PTSD was even more obvious. I just wanted to crawl under a fucking hole. Like, I didn't want to go anywhere. If anything, I self-sabotaged and isolated myself a lot, because I think my PTSD really formulated social anxiety for me. And because like on the surface, it's like I have PTSD. I'm so hypersensitive to conflict and people yelling to the point where I couldn't really attend. This is kind of funny. Okay, so I grew up in my mom's Southern Baptist. She grew up Southern Baptist, okay? So throughout my life, I've been to Southern Baptist churches, like, pretty frequently. I cannot really handle a lot of yelling, period. But I really specifically cannot handle that, like, loud screaming with the microphone feedback, and it's like the pastor just screaming death yelling into the microphone. I cannot stand, like, I'm so just hypersensitive to yelling and loud noises, and I've always been like that. And it's to the point where I really cannot stand fireworks or loud popping sounds. I remember in high school, I actually developed this phobia of balloons, and it was such an irrational phobia, and people were thinking I was being dramatic. I thought I was being dramatic because I was like, Kiana, it's a fucking balloon. Like, why is this that big of a deal over a balloon? But it took me to realize that it wasn't exactly like the balloon, like the plastic in and of itself. It was the fact that I was scared of the balloon popping and making a really loud popping noise. And I had this really like irrational fear that the balloon would pop in my face. How it would get in my face, I'm not quite sure, but I just pictured it popping in my face. And I was just like, holy shit. So anytime it was my birthday or anything special, I would really tell people, like, thank you, but please don't give me balloons, because I fucking hate balloons. Because if the balloon randomly pop, and then when people would give me balloons, I would just stare at the balloon and wait for it to pop, because I'm like, it's gonna pop. My biggest fear would just be getting caught off guard. And that's another thing with me and loud noises. Like, I've recognized that if I can prepare for the loud noise, so like if you tell me we are going to see fireworks and we are going to a fireworks show, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be fine. But if it's like I'm home and there are just fireworks randomly going off, that is so nerve-wracking for me, because I just don't know when they're gonna go off. So if I know the loud noise is coming, I'm pretty okay, but it's just like sudden loud noises. There we go. Sudden loud noises. And so, throughout college, it was hard. But I'm not gonna lie, the diagnosis really helped me. Being diagnosed helped me, because before I was diagnosed, I just thought that I was a frail, super ultra sensitive can't get it together. I know this just sounds really harsh, but I'm just letting you know, like, I was internalizing all these symptoms, like the panic attack. I'm thinking that there was something wrong with me, like there was, but I'm thinking like I'm built different. Everyone's better than me because people don't have panic attacks or people don't have the social anxiety that I have. So when my psychiatrist diagnosed me, yes, at first I was in denial, but later on, once I started doing research and discovered meditation and integrating more with my body, like, I know people really struggle with labels, and I totally understand if you don't like labels, and even if you do have PTSD and you're listening and you're just like, I don't really like saying that, or I don't like the label, like, I totally get it. But for me, having the label just like connected a huge dot, like just a big old blank was filled, and I was able to give myself a little more compassion. Well, some compassion. Now, this is when I gave myself mega compassion. I was able to give myself way more compassion when I realized, now I think this was a second counselor after college. So then after college, the panic attacks subside. I don't like loud noises, hypervigilant. My fight or flight response is overreactive. Okay, I get it. I got that. So going after college, now I'm starting to experience these symptoms that are more commonly related of people who have suffered complex PTSD. So at this point, I have so much shame. It's ridiculous. I have so much shame, guilt. My social anxiety has just turned into me being like very detached from my identity. My sense of self was just so fickle. I'm still even working through it now, but at the moment, I really didn't know what was going on. I was kind of looking at everybody like, okay, you know who you are, right? Like, everybody else must have this sense of self and sense of togetherness that I just don't have. And that's fine. I'm just built different. I'm just not built to make it. That's like my little like sad pity thing I say to myself. I'm like, I'm just not meant to make it. Like, but really, that's how I felt. I was like, maybe the cards are not in it for me. Like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. And again, I was internalizing my symptoms. So I was saying, oh, I have so much shame. Then I was feeling shame for having shame. And then I would say, oh, I feel so, even the loss of identity, that was hard. I didn't talk to anybody about that because I just couldn't even explain it to myself at the moment. But I'm trying to think of how did I start identifying with complex PTSD. I know it must have been because I remember I was talking to my cousin about it. Okay, so it must have been last year. Okay, so it must have been last year, February, March. So it must have been around the time I think I was I'd been exploring imposter syndrome. And somewhere along there, I think I really hate it. I wish I could connect the dots on when because complex PTSD is not a formal diagnosis and it's not really studied a lot. So I was not diagnosed with complex PTSD. Most people with PTSD come to that conclusion like on their own. So I came to that conclusion on my own. Sorry, I'm like dragging you guys. I can't remember like exactly where, but there's this Instagram account called Healing or it's Healing CPTSD or Healing and CPTSD. And now I know the therapist that I have now, I like confirmed with her, complex PTSD. And she said, yes, it sounds like, if you're already diagnosed with PTSD and, especially the shame and loss of identity, she said, it really sounds like you have complex PTSD because, complex PTSD. Oh, sorry. I don't know if I said this, but complex PTSD is, similar to PTSD, like the added symptoms I said, but the experience was usually prolonged for, I think it said over 3 months, but mine was for years and years. And like a lot of people I know, their childhood abuse or childhood emotional neglect or physical abuse that they experienced was for years and years, a lot of times for over a decade. And so of course, like, there's gonna be a sense of denial immediately after, because you're gonna say, yeah, my childhood was just fine and my parents love me, so they wouldn't hurt me, right? And my complex PTSD, does that mean it came from my parents? Yes. Is that their fault? Like, fault? Like, no, because if anything, my mom has complex PTSD, so I have a higher chance of even having it if she has it, aside from her. So, that was having PTSD. It makes the world feel scary. It makes me feel scary. Sometimes it makes people I love feel like monsters. It makes me feel like a monster. I feel like chronically misunderstood, and I have to catch myself from saying, you don't understand me, because I know there are so many people that do understand, and there are so many people that do experience the same things. But complex PTSD, it really puts you in this rabbit hole, and it just it can just really make you feel so alone, and like the helplessness. That's another symptom of complex PTSD and PTSD. But the helplessness that I feel of, like, will this ever get better? No, it won't. Like, yes, it will, but at the moment you're like, no, it won't. It will never get better. I don't know how this is gonna come together. And that's another thing. My symptoms sometimes can be so dramatic, so big, so engulfing, time consuming, that I'm like, who is gonna want to be with me? That's just a really common thought with a lot of survivors and a lot of people who are recovering from PTSD and complex PTSD. You're wondering, like, is anyone gonna be able to put up with me? Like, this is a lot. God damn, like, this is a lot going on. This is heavy. And for those of us who have compounded trauma, like trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, going through all those layers and really identifying those root causes, it's a lot of time and it's a lot of work and it's very messy. And so, we really have to be appreciative of our groups of people, in our safe spaces that we can go to and trust and feel safe and vulnerable. So, as a collective, we always have to really remember that and give survivors just more grace, empathy, and compassion, because as a survivor and as someone recovering from complex PTSD, we just need empathy. We need compassion. We don't need shame. It's like we have so much of our own. We don't need more of the world for being traumatized. And that's the thing. I was personalizing my symptoms so bad, and I was like, oh, I'm weak for feeling how I'm feeling, or I'm this for feeling that, or I'm this for whatever. But it's like, I've traumatized. So yeah, I'm gonna act a little funny. Like, I've been through some crazy ass shit that's not normal, that people shouldn't go through. And it's the same with other people. They've seen things that people shouldn't have seen. They've heard things that people shouldn't hear. In order to be healthy, there are things that shouldn't come into your life. And when things do, it's gonna leave a wound. It's gonna leave a mark. So sometimes I just don't want I feel shame for my symptoms sometimes. And I'm like, oh my God, cut me some slack. Like, if you've been through what I've been through, you might be acting worse. You might be crazy. You might not be here. Like, give me some slack for where I am. And maybe I'm speaking like to myself, but also to the people who I feel like really struggle to show empathy to PTSD survivors, and complex PTSD survivors, especially when it comes to understanding trauma. We have big T trauma, little t trauma. Hey, just because it's a little t, still traumatic. Just because you don't think it would have been traumatic for you or whatever, you think you would have put up with it or whatever the fuck, doesn't matter. It's that's the thing. When you're talking to a survivor, it's just so not about you. It's really about, just like I said, extending that empathy. But I think the beautiful thing is surviving, picking yourself up, airing out the wounds, stitching them back up again, healing. Yeah. It was like I said, I'm grateful for the diagnosis, to be honest. I'm able to let go a lot of the responsibility and guilt of my symptoms. I mean, my healing is my responsibility, but I'm not going to feel all bent out of shape for having bad days anymore when I know, like, Kiana, you have PTSD, like, you've been through crazy ass shit, like, it's okay. Extend yourself some grace. So just as I try to extend myself some grace, I just hope we try to do that to all the survivors out there in the world.